There comes a moment in the life of every chosen one when the silence becomes louder than any scream. When the people you birthed no longer meet your gaze with love, but with distance. You sit across the dinner table, but it feels like a spiritual chasm. You reach out with affection, but their arms remain folded, their hearts far. And in the stillness of your soul, you wonder, why don't my children love me? Welcome to Chosen One's sanctuary, where truth is not coded in comfort, but baptized in revelation. Today, we are entering sacred territory, the spiritual disconnect between the chosen and their own bloodline. And make no mistake, this is not just personal, it is prophetic. Throughout Scripture, those marked by divine favor were often misunderstood, even in their own homes. Joseph was envied. David was overlooked. Jesus himself was doubted by his own brothers. What you're experiencing is not rejection. It's spiritual resistance to the anointing you carry, and it has roots older than your parenting and deeper than behavior. It is vibrational, ancestral, prophetic. What if I told you that the very distance you're mourning is actually the sign that your light is doing what your voice never could? That their discomfort is proof your frequency is shifting the family line. There is a reason heaven chose you to be the one who wakes up first. But waking up means seeing clearly, and that includes the pain. Stay with me until the end of this message, because what you'll hear today may unlock not only the bond with your children, but the spiritual legacy they haven't yet understood. Let us begin with what most parents miss entirely: the hidden energies behind rejection, and why love, even when offered sincerely, doesn't always land when it's coming from a chosen one. The hidden energies behind parental rejection. There is a pain that cuts deeper than betrayal and sharper than abandonment. The pain of being unloved by the very ones who carry your blood. But chosen one, you must understand, this is not ordinary rejection. It is not merely about misunderstanding, attitude, or upbringing. This is energetic resistance. When God marks a person to carry divine frequency, that presence alone begins to agitate the atmosphere. Even in silence, you disturb darkness. Even in stillness, your very existence begins to unravel patterns that have ruled your lineage for generations. Your children, though precious and full of potential, are still navigating the spiritual current that surrounds you. They are not only responding to what you say or do, they are reacting to the vibrational truth of who you are becoming. And in a family line where love has long been tied to performance, appearance, or emotional suppression, the unconditional essence of a chosen one becomes terrifying, not because you are unsafe, but because your authenticity exposes everything false that once felt safe to them. This resistance is not rebellion, it is resonance. The old energy is being confronted by divine frequency, and that clash is echoing through the emotional field of your home. Their withdrawal is not because you failed. It's because your light succeeded in surfacing what had been long buried. Just like Joseph's presence stirred jealousy in his brothers before his destiny was ever fulfilled, your calling awakens a disruption. It doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel holy. But it is part of the prophecy. If you misread this rejection as failure, you will begin to shrink back, to parent from guilt instead of grace, to speak from wounds instead of wisdom. But if you see it for what it truly is, the beginning of transformation, then you will stand, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because chosen one, love withheld from you is often the first confirmation that heaven is breaking the curse through you. And if you feel that sting of absence, that cold silence from the ones you've given your all to, remember this. Before David ever wore a crown, he was left in the field by his father. Before Jesus called disciples, his own brothers refused to believe. Rejection is the furnace where authority is refined. The reversal of affection is a spiritual alarm. One of the most disorienting experiences for a parent is watching love turn cold. A child who once clung to you in innocence now avoids your eyes. Their laughter fades. Their hugs stop. What was once affection becomes guarded, transactional, or absent altogether. But chosen one, this reversal is not without reason. It is a signal, a divine alarm that something in the unseen realm is shifting. Affection does not vanish in a vacuum. It is displaced by spiritual friction. The moment your soul starts ascending, rising in awareness, cutting off toxic patterns, or stepping into your divine authority, that frequency begins to emit spiritual light. And while light is beautiful, it is also blinding to those still living in shadow. Your children, knowingly or not, may begin to pull away, not because they hate you, but because they don't yet understand the new you. They are adjusting to your awakening. This is not about failure. It is about friction. And friction is prophetic. Scripture tells us that Jesus came to his own, but his own received him not. Imagine the creator of all things walking among his people, healing, teaching, loving, and yet being misunderstood, even by those closest to him. If the Son of God experienced the ache of misrecognition, should we be surprised that the chosen vessels of this age are experiencing the same? Do not mistake spiritual resistance for emotional hatred. The enemy would love for you to internalize this reversal, to believe you are unlovable, unworthy, or spiritually out of touch. But the truth is, your presence is starting to rewire the emotional DNA of your household. And before there is restoration, there is often rupture. The moment of silence you dread, that painful gap between intention and response, is sacred ground. It is the very soil in which divine reconnection is being planted. But if you panic in this space, if you rush to fix, explain, or force, you may abort the deeper work God is doing beneath the surface. So let the silence teach. Let the coldness refine you. Let the absence call you deeper into presence. Because chosen one, affection may be hiding, but love, real love, is being rewritten. And soon, the same mouth that once turned away may be the one that says, "I see you now." The ache of affection reversed is not a final sentence. It is the beginning of a spiritual recalibration that will awaken your children in time. Inherited spirits of conditional love. There is a shadow that follows the bloodline, not seen, but deeply felt. A pattern that repeats in whispers, not words. Chosen one, many of the wounds you're now trying to heal in your children were first inflicted upon you, and upon your parents, and theirs before them. These are inherited spirits, legacies of conditional love passed down like invisible chains. Love that had to be earned, approval that came with achievement, affection that vanished when obedience failed. You may have sworn to do things differently, to speak gently, to affirm more, to be present where others were absent. And yet, even in your best efforts, there are moments when a tone slips out that sounds eerily like your own father, or a rule becomes rigid, not because you wanted control, but because fear took the wheel. The truth is, the energy of conditional love travels not just through behavior, but through the unhealed places in the soul. Conditional love teaches children that they must perform to be seen. And if you were raised in this energy, even unknowingly, it imprints itself in your spiritual field. Your child may not be rebelling against you. They may be resisting the vibration of conditional acceptance, a frequency you vowed to never carry but still have not fully cleansed. This is not condemnation. This is revelation. Because when you see it, you can stop it. Consider Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, 3 generations of covenant men. And yet in their lineage, favoritism and emotional blindness traveled unchecked. Isaac favored Esau. Rebekah favored Jacob. Jacob repeated the cycle with Joseph. The consequences? Sibling rivalry, emotional distance, betrayal, exile. Not because these men lacked faith, but because they did not heal what they inherited. You, chosen one, are the interruption, the curse breaker. But this work is not done through performance. It is done through presence, through honest reflection, through divine recalibration. When you sit in silence and ask, "Is this how I would have wanted to be spoken to as a child?" you begin to uproot what others buried in you. When you forgive your own parents, not to excuse, but to release, you dissolve the residue that clings to your parenting. If this is ignored, the legacy repeats. The child grows up carrying the same hunger for approval, the same ache of, "I was only loved when I made them proud." But if you confront this, if you speak love without condition, if you hold space without demand, if you bless even when disappointed, then you are sowing something entirely new, a garden that will feed generations. And when your child looks back one day, they won't remember a perfect parent. They'll remember the first one who stayed soft, who chose love without leverage, and who looked generational pain in the eye and refused to pass it on. The weight of authority unwanted by the flesh. To be chosen is to be crowned before the crowd ever cheers. It is to carry spiritual weight that your household often cannot explain and may not accept. Authority, when truly divine, does not come with applause. It comes with pressure. Chosen one, your presence alone disrupts atmospheres. Not because you demand submission, but because the frequency of your assignment convicts what's been comfortable for too long. Your children may sense this even before they understand it. They may push back, not with arguments, but with avoidance, not with words, but with emotional retreat. Because your authority, rooted in spiritual integrity, does not feel like the world's version of power. It feels heavier, holier. And for those still developing identity, that holiness can feel invasive. In the days of young Samuel, we see a child walking in divine favor, hearing the voice of God, while grown men ignored it. Yet in Eli's house, Samuel's purity became a silent rebuke to the corruption of Eli's sons. They mocked what he represented, not because Samuel had wronged them, but because his presence exposed the compromise they refused to confront. In your own home, this same dynamic may be unfolding. You offer wisdom, but it's treated like criticism. You guide with love, but it's received as control. Why? Because spiritual authority disrupts emotional stagnation. It shines too bright for those still hiding in shadow. And for your children, that can feel like pressure before it ever becomes peace. But here is the test. Do you lead with presence or with power? Authority given by God must be wielded with tenderness. The goal is not to be obeyed. It is to be trusted. It is to hold space for the discomfort your authority awakens, without making it about your ego. If you misuse this weight, it will crush the connection. But if you sanctify it, If you walk in it with humility and wisdom, it becomes the very anchor that your children will one day cling to when the world starts to shake. Your calling was never meant to feel convenient. It was meant to carve space for heaven to dwell. And sometimes, heaven's voice arrives long before the heart is ready to listen. The role of parental spiritual ego. Chosen one. There is a danger more subtle than anger, more damaging than absence. It hides itself in wisdom and cloaks itself in good intention. It speaks in scripture and teaches in parables, but beneath it lies a whisper of pride. This is the voice of spiritual ego, the belief that because you are awakened, you are above. That because you are called, you are unquestionable. And though your calling is holy, ego is not. When spiritual authority becomes expectation rather than invitation, it begins to fracture the very relationships it was meant to redeem. Children are perceptive in ways we forget. They may not understand theology, but they feel energy. And when your guidance carries the undercurrent of superiority, when your love is offered with hidden terms like, as long as you understand, or once you see what I see, they withdraw. They begin to associate your spiritual insight not with freedom, but with pressure, not with warmth, but with scrutiny. They don't resist because they are rebellious. They resist because your presence no longer feels like a place to rest. And when rest disappears, trust follows. The Pharisees of Jesus' day had scripture, they had tradition, they had power, but they lacked presence. They knew how to speak of God, but had forgotten how to embody Him. Jesus, by contrast, sat with children, welcomed sinners, listened deeply. His authority came not from proclamation, but from compassion, from stillness, from the absence of ego. When your child struggles, are you the safe place they run to, or the standard they're afraid of disappointing? When they confess weakness, do you listen from your spirit or from your pedestal? The chosen one is not called to build altars to their own enlightenment. You are called to kneel beside those still learning to walk. If spiritual ego remains unchecked, it will become the silent wedge between you and your child's heart. You'll notice their voice getting quieter, their visits growing shorter, and eventually, their eyes no longer searching for yours. Not because they don't love you, but because they no longer feel seen beneath your revelation. But if you lay down that pride, if you choose presence over performance, humility over hierarchy, then your wisdom becomes a light, not a weight. And your child, even in their doubt, will begin to feel that the same God who speaks to you is the same God who still embraces them. Children as mirrors of energetic misalignment. There is no mirror more honest than a child. Their behaviors, their moods, even their silence, they reflect more than defiance. They reflect energy. Chosen. 1. Your children are not merely reacting to your words. They are responding to your vibration, to the current you carry beneath the surface, to what your spirit speaks when your mouth stays shut. A restless parent often raises a guarded child. A parent heavy with unspoken grief often raises a child who doesn't know how to trust joy. When your energy is burdened with past wounds, silent judgments, or self-doubt, that weight enters every room with you. And your child, though they may not articulate it, absorbs it. They recoil. They resist. Not because they are broken, but because their spirit is alert. Children are barometers of the home's emotional climate. You may believe you're hiding your inner storm, but they feel the pressure drop before it rains. That moment when your tone shifts, that glance that carries exhaustion, that hurried answer during dinner. These are not small things. They are signals. And when a child receives too many mixed signals, they stop trusting the air around them. They pull back to preserve their peace. This doesn't mean you must become perfect, but it does mean you must become honest. It means you must look inward and ask, what am I radiating when I'm silent? What unspoken belief about myself is shaping how I respond to my child? Because chosen one, the energy of your presence will always speak louder than the principles you preach. Consider Moses, called, chosen, anointed, and yet even he misrepresented God's spirit in front of the people. One outburst, one moment where anger overrode alignment, and it cost him the promised land, not because God withdrew favor, but because the energy of the leader shapes the trajectory of those who follow. You are shaping something holy, not through your declarations, but through your frequency. When your child retreats, don't chase them with correction. Realign, breathe, reflect. Invite the Spirit to cleanse the atmosphere of your heart before you enter theirs. And remember, they are not resisting you. They are responding to the unspoken call for you to come home to yourself first. Because only when your spirit is settled can theirs begin to unfold in safety again. The spiritual assault on the family unit. Chosen one, there is a reason the warfare feels most intense in your own home. Not in the public spaces, not in the ministry room, but behind closed doors, at the dinner table, in the silence of your child's bedroom, in the cold distance of a once tender gaze. This is not coincidence. It is a calculated strategy from the enemy, because the family is the first altar. And if the enemy can desecrate the altar, he can distort the legacy. You were chosen not just to parent, but to preserve the bloodline, to become the intercessor, the spiritual architect, the breaker of every ancient agreement that once ruled your house. And because of that mantle, you became a target. The enemy does not waste his strongest weapons on the indifferent. He saves them for the ones marked with generational assignments, for the ones called to birth not just children, but destiny. And so he comes after your connection. He comes after your communication. He stirs misunderstanding, fuels resentment, and manipulates the tender emotions of the young to turn them against the one God chose to cover them. Just as Pharaoh was stirred to destroy all Hebrew male infants when Moses was born, just as Herod ordered a massacre at the birth of Christ, the pattern has always been the same. When deliverance is near, the attack intensifies, and often the child becomes the battlefield. But here is what you must remember. The fight is not against your child, it is for them. The moment you take their distance personally, the enemy wins. The moment you begin to retaliate with harshness, resentment, or pride, you mirror the very strategy sent to divide. But when you recognize the assignment, when you see the resistance as a signal of how powerful your family's future is, then you reposition yourself not as a wounded parent, but as a spiritual warrior. You pray with strategy. You speak with intention. You love without condition, not because they deserve it, but because your love is anointed to heal what they don't yet understand. Do not be surprised if your child pushes away during your ascension. They are not rejecting your essence. They are resisting the disruption your light causes in the dark systems that have quietly ruled your home. But darkness cannot remain where light is consistent. Keep showing up in alignment guarding the spiritual atmosphere of your house. And remember, it was never about whether your child loved you. It was about whether you could love them without letting the battle inside them change the one you've already won. The silent season is a divine setup. There is a sacred weight to silence, a tension in the quiet that chosen ones know all too well. The calls stop. The hugs fade. The conversation dries up until you're left alone in a house full of unanswered prayers. But what if this silence isn't a punishment, but a preparation? God often pulls back external validation to amplify internal recalibration. When your child withdraws, when affection fades, and their heart becomes unreachable, you are being ushered into the holy classroom of stillness, not so you can fix them, but so that you can face yourself. In the silence, the unhealed parts of you begin to rise. The need to be seen, the ache to be affirmed, the pain of being misunderstood, all of it floats to the surface, demanding attention. And that's not the enemy. That's the mercy of God. Because He knows that to truly lead, you must be emptied of the parts of you that still crave control, validation, or reward. Look to the wilderness seasons of Scripture. Moses fled to the desert before confronting Pharaoh. Elijah sat under a tree with nothing left to give. Even Jesus withdrew into solitude before launching His ministry. The silence was never abandonment. It was always alignment. In this divine setup, your child's silence becomes a sacred mirror. They are not just testing boundaries. They are becoming the catalyst for your own soul work. And when you stop fighting the silence and start sitting with it, you'll begin to hear the quiet voice of the Spirit again. It says, "I'm preparing you for a different kind of connection, one that doesn't depend on their response, one that is rooted in who I say you are." This season will not last forever, but how you carry it will shape what comes next. If you fill the silence with fear, you will plant seeds of anxiety. If you meet the silence with presence, you will plant seeds of restoration. Chosen one, the silence is not empty. It is sacred. It is soil. And if you remain rooted long enough, what felt like abandonment will reveal itself as the womb of something holy. A deeper connection, a healed pattern, a spiritual authority forged not in noise, but in stillness. Prophetic identity often arrives before relational recognition. Chosen one, you must understand a hard truth. The world does not always recognize the anointing until the fruit of it becomes undeniable. And sometimes, the very ones closest to you, the ones you've raised, held, prayed over, will not see you clearly until the assignment you carry begins to bloom in places they cannot reach. This is not rejection. It is prophecy unfolding in real time. Even Jesus, the Son of the living God, walked among His brothers for decades, sharing meals, working beside them, enduring ordinary life, while carrying the extraordinary within. And yet, John tells us plainly, even His own brothers did not believe in Him. Not because He lacked love, not because He failed, but because prophetic identity always arrives before recognition. You have been trying to earn the love of those who are spiritually asleep to who you truly are. You've explained, you've humbled yourself, you've overextended. Still, they pull back. Still, they resist. And you wonder, what more can I do? But the truth is, you are not meant to convince. You are meant to embody. Your assignment is not to be understood. It is to be obedient. Many prophets walked alone before the people could see. Joseph dreamed before his brothers bowed. David was anointed while still tending sheep, forgotten by his own father. Esther carried royalty in silence before she ever wore the crown. And you are walking among those who cannot yet receive you because their vision is still calibrated to the version of you before you awakened. But don't shrink. Don't dilute your frequency to match their comfort. Walk in your identity with grace, not with arrogance, not with resentment, but with peace. Because when the oil begins to flow publicly, the same ones who distance themselves in private will begin to feel the pull. The ones who said little now listen. The ones who dismissed now discern. This is not your doing. This is divine timing. Heaven opens recognition only when the soul is ready to receive. Until then, your presence is the sermon. Your alignment is the altar. Your consistency is the prophecy unfolding. So if you feel unseen, misread, dishonored, remember this: you were never called to be received before your time. You were called to hold the identity, even when no one claps for it. Because the delay in recognition is not a sign of your failure. It is proof of your spiritual maturity. The call to transmit, not convert. It is one of the greatest mistakes the chosen make, trying to force awakening before its appointed time. You see the patterns in your children. You feel the urgency. You want so deeply for them to rise, to see, to hear what you hear. And so you speak, you press, you plead. But instead of drawing them in, the connection tightens like a knot. Their hearts shut, their eyes roll, and you begin to feel like a stranger in your own house. Why? Because you were trying to convert when you were called to transmit. Conversion is the work of the Spirit. Transmission is the posture of the vessel. The truth is, your energy preaches louder than your words. Your alignment teaches more than your corrections. Your peace in chaos, your patience in defiance, your presence in absence. These become the sermon they cannot unhear. And when their spirit is ready, they will return to those vibrations like a compass finding home. Jesus never chased. He radiated. He didn't beg people to believe. He embodied truth. And those with ears to hear found him. Those who were not ready turned away. And still, he loved them. Your children may not be ready to receive your message, but they can still feel your light. They may not follow your path yet, but your walk is leaving footprints that one day their soul will trace back to wholeness. If you speak from fear, they feel control. If you speak from disappointment, they feel shame. But when you simply transmit love, steady, unconditional, authentic, they feel heaven. Do not preach them into resistance. Transmit them into remembrance. Your role is not to open their eyes. It is to keep yours open, even when they close theirs. It is to carry the frequency of grace, of truth, of spiritual steadiness, so that when they are ready to awaken, they know exactly where the light has always been. And one day, without a word, they may come to you, not for instruction, but for alignment. Because you chose not to force their awakening, but to faithfully guard the flame, the spiritual danger of bitterness and shame. There is a quiet corrosion that enters the soul when love goes unanswered, a heaviness that builds in the unspoken places, where the rejection lives, where the silence echoes. Bitterness begins not with rage, but with weariness. It seeps in slowly. A sigh after another cold shoulder, a second glance that feels like blame. And before long, the chosen one begins to question not just the bond, but their worth within it. Shame follows closely behind. It doesn't shout. It whispers. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I'm too intense. Maybe the reason they don't love me is me. But chosen one, This is where the enemy wages his most intimate warfare, not on your household, but on your identity. Because if he can make you feel unworthy of love, you'll stop radiating it. You'll start parenting from defense, from guilt, from spiritual exhaustion, and your authority, once rooted in clarity, will fracture under the weight of unspoken self-rejection. This is not what you were chosen for. Bitterness may feel like armor, but it poisons the well. Shame may masquerade as humility, but it suffocates your frequency. These are not just emotional burdens. They are spiritual interruptions. They break the flow between you and the Spirit, between you and your children, and between you and your purpose. Look to Naomi, who renamed herself Mara, meaning bitter, because of the pain she endured. Her losses convinced her that she was no longer the woman God had called. She survived, but her vision dimmed. And it wasn't until Ruth stayed, until divine alignment returned, that Naomi began to reclaim her identity. Bitterness will blind you. Shame will shrink you. And both will cause you to parent from a wounded place rather than a wise one. But when you bring these to the altar, not to hide but to surrender, healing begins. Not because your child changes, but because you remember who you are without their affirmation. You are not the failure the silence suggests. You are not the villain your own guilt accuses you of being. You are a carrier of generational light, a guardian of divine lineage. And even if no one in your home thanks you today, heaven has already sealed the record. If you let bitterness speak for you, love will lose its voice. If you allow shame to narrate your story, your legacy will shrink beneath its weight. But when you rise, quietly, consistently, without demand, your love becomes prophetic. It pierces the silence. It disrupts the enemy's strategy, and it prepares the soil for reconciliation in its appointed time. Even if they don't say it now, your love is sowing something eternal. Divine realignment through sacred ritual. Chosen one, the bond you long for will not be restored through willpower alone. Restoration is not just about apology or behavior. It is about frequency, about inviting heaven back into the space where tension once ruled. And that begins with sacred ritual. In the Old Testament, the presence of God did not fall randomly. It fell on prepared places, on altars, on tabernacles, on vessels that had been cleansed, set apart, consecrated. The same is true for your home, for your relationships, for the space between your heart and your child's. Realignment requires intention. It requires the daily, quiet choices to prepare the atmosphere for reconciliation. Even when no one else sees the work you're doing, light a candle and whisper a blessing before they wake. Place your hand over their door and pray over their mind when they're asleep. Release forgiveness at the kitchen sink. Practice silence instead of sarcasm. Smile when your heart wants to retreat. These are not small acts. These are altars, and heaven honors them. Children may not remember every lesson you speak, but they will remember the energy you created. They will remember the peace they couldn't explain, the warmth they couldn't describe, the safety they felt in your presence, even when their behavior said otherwise. Ritual recalibrates the home. It signals to the spirit, this place is ready, not perfect, but available. And in that availability, God breathes. Don't wait for your child to return to begin the work. Begin now. Build the altar. Set the table. Bless the threshold. Because when their heart begins to awaken, they will return not just to a house, but to a sanctuary. one where their spirit knows, I am safe here. I am loved here. I am seen, not for who I was expected to be, but for who I truly am. The work is sacred, the space is holy, and the realignment has already begun. All heaven needs is your yes, and your daily, intentional return to love. Forgiveness and release are also essential. There is a moment in the journey of every chosen one when words are no longer enough. When teaching, correcting, even loving no longer reach the heart you once held so close. And in that quiet moment, heaven whispers one final invitation, not to control, not to convince, but to release. Forgiveness is not for those who deserve it. It is for those who carry too much to walk further without it. Bitterness is heavy. Resentment is sharp. And carrying the pain of unmet expectations, unspoken apologies, and years of silent tension will rot even the most beautiful love from within. That is why forgiveness is not a favor to your child. It is a commandment for your own spiritual freedom. Chosen one, you may not realize it, but part of your heart is still waiting for them to say they're sorry, for them to see your efforts, for them to finally say the words you've craved. But if you tether your healing to their confession, you will remain a prisoner of delay. The kingdom you're building cannot wait for their recognition. You are too important. Your calling is too sacred. When Jesus hung on the cross, surrounded by those who mocked, betrayed, and abandoned him, he did not wait for apology. He spoke heaven into the moment. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That is not weakness. That is authority. The ability to bless while bleeding. The ability to love beyond comprehension. This is what it means to be chosen. Forgiveness breaks spiritual contracts. It silences the enemy's accusations. It severs the unseen ties that bitterness tries to tighten, and it creates space for true love to grow again. Not the love born of expectation, but the love rooted in freedom. But forgiveness alone is not enough. You must also release. Release the idea of what the relationship was supposed to be. Release the timeline you thought healing would follow. Release the version of your child you still hold in your mind, and bless the path they are actually walking. Not in resignation, but in reverence. Trusting that if God has called you, He has also marked them, and He knows when to awaken what you cannot. When you forgive and release, your energy shifts, your spirit lightens, and your home becomes a place where mercy flows again. Not because everything is fixed, but because everything is finally surrendered. Honoring your children's individuality. Chosen one. The moment you were called, your life took on a different rhythm, one shaped by divine instruction, spiritual urgency, and heaven's blueprint. But your children, though born through you, were not created to be copies of you. They are not your second chance. They are not your spiritual proof. They are sovereign souls with timelines, temperaments, and destinies that unfold according to their own covenant. This is one of the most misunderstood burdens of parenthood for the chosen. Believing that because you carry prophetic vision, your children must follow that same path. And when they deviate, when they question, doubt, or disconnect, it feels like betrayal. But it is not betrayal. It is divergence, a sacred unfolding you are invited to witness, not manage. When Jacob wrestled with the angel, he came away limping, but also renamed. And though he passed his blessing to his sons, each child bore a different prophecy. Joseph would dream, Judah would lead, Levi would serve in the temple. Not one path was the same, but each path was holy. You may wish your child walked closer with God. You may long for them to understand what you've seen. But if your love is contingent on them mirroring you, it will feel like a leash, not a home. Honor their individuality, their personality, their questions, their mistakes. These are not threats to your authority. They are invitations to expand your love. When your child sees that your acceptance does not shrink with their choices, they will begin to trust again. And that trust, once rekindled, becomes the doorway through which truth can flow. Not because you forced it, but because you became safe enough for their spirit to return. This does not mean you abandon your values. It means you lead with presence, not pressure. That is where transformation begins. And sometimes, the most prophetic thing a parent can say is, "Even if you never understand me, I will always see you, and I will always love you." Through that kind of love, heaven begins to whisper again, not just to your child, but through them. Because when individuality is honored, identity is restored. And where identity is restored, the kingdom of God begins to manifest. Right there, at the kitchen table, in the car ride home, in the stillness of two hearts beginning to meet again. Practical exercises to support this process. Spiritual transformation doesn't only happen in visions and prayer. It also happens in the gentle repetition of sacred routines. Chosen one, your mission is not just to carry light. It is to anchor that light in the rhythms of daily life. Your healing, your restoration with your children will require more than desire. It will require practice, consistent, intentional, spirit-led practice. Begin with morning intention. Before you speak a word to your child, speak a word to heaven. Align your frequency. Pray not just for peace in the home, but for clarity in your own reactions. Ask, what am I carrying into this day? Because every encounter begins with the energy you bring into the room. As you move through the day, build micro moments of presence. Look them in the eyes when they speak. Pause what you're doing when they enter the room. Place your hand gently on their shoulder when they pass by. These moments may seem small, but they are spiritual signals. I am here. I see you. You matter. A child who feels seen will eventually risk being known. Introduce evening reflection. After the day closes, sit in stillness, even for just 5 minutes, and ask, where did I lead with love? Where did I react from fear? This is not for shame. It is for realignment. Heaven does not demand perfection, only awareness. When tension arises, and it will, practice sacred pause. Breathe. Literally inhale the spirit before you exhale emotion. Speak only once your heart has returned to center. This is how you model emotional regulation, not just through advice, but through energy. Infuse the environment itself with intention. Light a candle during dinner. Play soft music in the background. Keep certain rooms clear of clutter and conflict. The spirit feels the atmosphere, even when words are absent. Let your home become sanctuary by design, not just by hope. Finally, bless your child in silence. You don't always need to speak it out loud. You can bless them while folding their clothes, while making their food, while watching them walk out the door. Say in your spirit, may they walk in truth. May their heart stay open. May love find them, even when I cannot. The spirit hears, and heaven moves. These are not techniques. They are consecrated rituals, daily alignments that transform your presence from stress to sacred, from reactive to radiant. And over time, these small choices begin to rebuild the foundation that was once cracked. Not through pressure, but through consistency. Not through control, but through peace. Because the love of a chosen one is not loud. It is lasting. Shared experiences that cultivate joy, laughter, and creativity. Chosen one, not every moment of healing must feel heavy. In fact, one of the most overlooked strategies of divine restoration is joy. Laughter, play. These are not distractions from the work. They are the work. Because joy is the language of safety, and a child will only open up where they feel they can exhale. Many chosen ones become so consumed with correction, structure, or spiritual urgency that they forget. Healing doesn't always come through the front door. Sometimes it arrives through the side window of a joke, a game, a spontaneous moment of dancing in the kitchen when the song hits just right. Return to joy, not as a reward for good behavior, but as a spiritual offering. Watch a funny movie together. Invite them to teach you something they love. Get silly. Get messy. Let them see you without the mantle. Just you, the human, the heart. These moments create warmth, and warmth melts the walls that words never could. Even if they don't say a word, their nervous system begins to associate your presence with ease, not expectation. And this alone is sacred. Creativity is another bridge. Paint together, cook together, build something, even if it's imperfect. Because when hands are busy, hearts begin to speak. The pressure of talking it out fades, and the soul finds its way through art, through music, through motion. This is not regression. This is return. A return to the childlike spirit that trusts first and explains later. And when you create moments of joy, you restore that which trauma tried to steal. The ability to connect without fear. Even God, in His wisdom, embedded play into creation. Rivers laugh. Stars sing. Animals dance. And we, made in His image, heal when we are allowed to do the same. Let your home echo not only with discipline and teaching, but with laughter. Because laughter is proof that your love has created enough room for freedom. And where freedom dwells, healing is never far behind. Connection is strengthened through moments of lightness as much as through serious guidance. Chosen one, wisdom flows like a river, but the banks that hold it steady are often made of joy. You may feel that your calling requires gravity, that the responsibility on your shoulders demands constant vigilance. And while your role is indeed sacred, it is also deeply human. Your children do not only need your spiritual strength, they need your softness. They need to know that the one who prays with power can also laugh without fear. Serious guidance may shape their direction, but lightness invites them into relationship. It reminds them that they are not projects to be fixed or prophecies to be fulfilled. They are sons and daughters, worthy of delight, of celebration, of ease. And you, chosen one, were never meant to carry the mantle so tightly that your arms could no longer open in play. Think of Jesus, the one whose words calmed storms and raised the dead. And yet, children ran to him, climbed into his lap. Why? Because the frequency of his authority included gentleness, lightness, the joy that says, you are safe here, you can laugh here, you can just be. When you make space for lightness, for shared meals, unexpected dancing, bedtime stories told with ridiculous voices, you signal something powerful. I don't just love you when you're growing. I love you when you're simply being. That kind of love does not erase correction. It makes correction easier to receive. There is healing in the ordinary, in sitting on the floor and building something silly, in running through the rain instead of waiting for it to pass, in letting go of the outcome and just being with them, not to teach or fix, but to connect. These moments are not wasted. They are weaving the unseen threads of trust, slowly and quietly, until one day the fabric of relationship feels whole again. And if you've gone too long without this kind of lightness, if tension has silenced laughter and time has numbed wonder, don't despair. It is never too late to reintroduce joy, not as a performance, but as presence, not as a mask, but as medicine. Laughter does not diminish your authority, it deepens it. Because the chosen one, who can weep with heaven and laugh with their child, becomes the very embodiment of the kingdom, full of truth, full of grace. So let joy find you again, not as a break from your purpose, but as a confirmation of it. Because where lightness flows, love flows freely. And where love flows, everything sacred begins to come alive. Conflict, when it arises, is a test of presence and empathy. Conflict is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Suppression is. The refusal to enter hard spaces with softness is. Chosen one, you are not called to eliminate conflict. You are called to transfigure it, to stand in the fire and keep your spirit open, to hear what was meant as a jab and respond as if it were a wound. Because more often than not, it is. When your child lashes out, when they withdraw, roll their eyes, raise their voice, they are not trying to destroy you. They are reaching through layers of pain, testing the walls, asking silently, "Can you love me here too?" And this is where your presence must speak louder than your position. This is where empathy becomes your covering, your strategy, your strength. You were not chosen because you are emotionally invincible. You were chosen because you are willing to enter the tension without losing your alignment. Conflict, handled with spiritual clarity, becomes a classroom. Every disagreement is a chance to model what it means to stay regulated, to stay curious, to stay rooted in love, even when your child is spinning in fear or frustration. Jesus didn't walk away from conflict. He sat with the angry, the doubting, the broken. His presence was the balm. Not always his words, but his calm, his stillness, his refusal to be drawn into reaction. When conflict rises, breathe before speaking. Let the Spirit lead your posture, not your pride. Ask questions instead of issuing verdicts. Reflect feelings before correcting words. Let your child feel, even if you disagree. This does not mean you tolerate disrespect. It means you address it from centeredness, not control. Chosen one, you are the thermostat in your home, not the thermometer. You set the spiritual temperature, and in conflict, you are given the rare opportunity to show your child a love that doesn't retreat, a love that corrects without condemning, that stands firm without folding, that sees past the words into the ache beneath them. If you pass this test, not once, but over time, your child will begin to trust that even their worst moments cannot drive you away. And that trust is holy. That trust is healing. That trust is what opens the door for transformation long after the fight is over. Because when conflict is met with love, what began as division becomes the foundation of deeper connection. And in the ashes of misunderstanding, something eternal begins to rise. Your children learn that their hearts can be expressed safely. Chosen one, every time you choose presence over pressure, softness over shame, and listening over lecturing, you do something miraculous. You teach your child that their heart is a safe place to be. not just when they're performing, not just when they're agreeable, but when they are raw, reactive, vulnerable, and afraid. This is no small thing. This is a holy reversal, because many of us were not taught this ourselves. We were taught to suppress, to conform, to perform love rather than receive it. But when you hold space for your child's authentic expression, even when it's messy, you interrupt generations of emotional exile. Children don't need perfect parents. They need safe ones. Parents who can witness a meltdown without mirroring it, who can hear the harsh words and still believe in the tender truth buried beneath them, who can say, "I see you," even when they don't agree. That is not weakness. That is spiritual mastery. Over time, these moments accumulate. The child learns, I can tell the truth and still be loved here. I can fail and not lose connection. I can feel deeply and not be alone in it. And when that safety becomes familiar, their heart begins to open, not all at once, but in slow, sacred layers. This kind of parenting does not always yield immediate results. You may still experience resistance, silence, rejection, but underneath, healing is happening. The nervous system is recalibrating. The soul is being rewired to believe that love does not vanish under pressure. Think of how Jesus responded to the woman caught in adultery. The crowd waited for punishment. He knelt, he paused, he offered dignity before correction. And in that one act, he restored her ability to trust love again. That is your model. That is your mantle. You are not just raising a child. You are teaching a soul that emotional honesty will not be met with abandonment, that their heart, in its most honest, fragile state, is still worthy of connection. And in time, that becomes the foundation of everything else. Communication, trust, healing, legacy. Because once a child knows their heart is safe, they begin to offer it freely. Integrate moments of shared joy. Chosen one, if love is the foundation and presence is the structure, then joy is the breath that fills the space. You are building something sacred, a relationship that reflects heaven's heart. But heaven is not solemn silence. It is celebration. It is music. It is feasting and laughter and radiant delight. Your home needs this too. Shared joy is not optional. It is essential. It dissolves tension that discipline alone cannot fix. It rekindles warmth when words have failed. It reminds the spirit that love is not just serious, it is also light. And lightness, when rooted in love, becomes healing. Take time to play, even if it feels awkward at first. Even if you're tired or discouraged, play a game. Tell an embarrassing story. Dance to music that makes no sense. Let your child see that the weight you carry has not taken your wonder, that you still know how to smile. Not because life is easy, but because love still lives here. These moments of shared joy are prophetic seeds. They create emotional memory. They speak to your child's heart, saying, "This place is safe. This connection is alive. This love includes laughter." And those memories, those silly, sacred, shared moments, become anchors during storms. The prodigal son did not return to a lecture. He returned to music, feasting, dancing. His father knew, now is the time to celebrate. Restoration is not completed in conversation alone. It is sealed in joy. So make room for joy, even in the in-between, especially in the in-between. Let it be the oil that softens old wounds. Let it be the sound that echoes louder than past hurt. Because when joy is present, love becomes unforgettable. And the child who learns to laugh with you, not just obey you, will one day return not out of guilt, but out of gratitude, not to repay you, but to rejoice with you. In that moment, chosen one, you will know. The bond was never truly broken, only buried, waiting for the light to bring it back to life. Presence and empathy are not optional luxuries, they are spiritual practices. Chosen one, this path you walk is not a parenting method. It is a consecration, a covenant, a holy agreement between your soul and heaven to be the vessel through which love flows into a generation still learning how to feel. Presence is not something you give when you have time. It is the altar you build every day, whether the room is quiet or chaotic. And empathy is not a personality trait. It is a sacred language, a frequency of heaven, a direct reflection of how God meets you in your lowest places. When you practice presence, you signal to your child's nervous system, you matter now, not later, not when you improve, right now. This breaks the spell of performance. It teaches them that value is not earned by behavior, but affirmed by being. And when you pair that presence with empathy, something miraculous happens. Their defenses lower, their breath slows. Their spirit begins to believe that this connection is not a trap. That being seen does not mean being judged. But this takes consistency, not perfection, consistency. Day by day, moment by moment, the choice to show up again, to sit when it's uncomfortable, to listen when it's easier to lecture, to stay emotionally open even when you're tired of the rejection. Because your children aren't just listening to your words, they are measuring the weight of your spirit. Presence is weight. And when it is grounded in empathy, it heals on contact. Think of the woman who touched the hem of Jesus' garment. He didn't speak first. He didn't teach. He simply was. And his presence carried such power that healing flowed without a single command. This is what you carry. Not the authority of control, the authority of presence. You don't need all the right words. You need the right posture, a heart that leans in, a soul that breathes before reacting, a spirit that remembers. This is sacred ground. And every conversation, every moment of play or pause or conflict is not a disruption to your mission. It is the mission. When you live this way, your home becomes a sanctuary, not because it's quiet, not because it's perfect, but because your spirit has made room for heaven to dwell there. Presence, empathy, again and again, until the walls fall, until the heart opens, until your children know, not from theory, but from experience, that they are profoundly, unshakably, and eternally loved. And from that knowing, everything else begins to bloom. You transform interactions into sacred exchanges. This is the final truth you must carry. Chosen one, nothing is ordinary when you are aligned. Every eye contact, every touch, every word spoken without defense. These are not just parenting tasks. They are portals, sacred exchanges where heaven touches earth through you. When you pause to listen, truly listen, you invite your child into the presence of God without ever mentioning his name. When you hold your frustration without lashing out, you model to them what grace looks like in flesh. When you stay soft in a hard moment, your energy preaches a gospel louder than scripture. A gospel that says, love will not leave. Love does not require performance. Love remains. Your home may still be noisy. Your child may still be resistant. The bond may not yet look like the restoration you pray for. But the shift has already begun. Because sacred transformation rarely announces itself. It hums beneath the surface, unseen, until suddenly everything feels different. Your consistency, not your intensity, is what changes the atmosphere. Your willingness to show up day after day with softness, clarity, and faith tells the spiritual realm, this house belongs to love now. This family is realigning. This legacy is healing. And one day, your child will remember. Maybe not today, maybe not even next year, but they will remember the tone of your voice when they expected wrath and received mercy. They will remember the warmth of your presence when they thought you'd retreat. They will remember that your love never punished them for being lost. It waited, watched, and welcomed. This is the sacred labor of the chosen ones. You build altars in the middle of tension. You plant peace in soil cracked by generations of misunderstanding. And you do it not for recognition, but for remembrance, that your children may grow up knowing what love feels like in a human body. This is how heaven breaks through. This is how walls dissolve. This is how the bond, once strained, becomes unshakable. Somewhere between the silence and the storm, between the pain of being misunderstood and the ache of loving without return, the chosen one is being shaped, not into a perfect parent, but into a spiritual cornerstone. And perhaps that is the mystery hidden in this season, that your children's resistance was never a rejection, but a refinement, that the space between you was never empty, but sacred, a field where legacy is being rewritten, one intentional act of love at a time. God has always used separation as preparation. Joseph was cast out before he became a deliverer. David was sent to the field before he was crowned. Even Jesus endured the loneliness of rejection before the fullness of his mission unfolded. And now, you stand in that same holy pattern, not forsaken, but forged. What if the very distance that broke your heart was the soil that made it holy? The truth is, love that echoes heaven will always feel strange in a world built on conditions. And the love you've been called to embody is not imitation, it is revelation. A love that stays when pushed away. A love that listens without rushing to fix. A love that redefines what it means to be a parent by first becoming a sanctuary. You may never receive the apology you deserve. You may never hear the words your heart longs for, but you will leave behind something greater, an energetic imprint, a spiritual memory, a legacy of alignment that teaches your children, even if only through hindsight, what love really feels like when it comes from heaven's hands. So take heart, chosen one. The seed has been planted. The atmosphere is shifting. The soil may feel dry now, but rain is coming. And when it does, what you've sown in the quiet will rise in strength. Here is your prophetic seal. You are not just parenting. You are prophesying with your presence. You are not losing love. You are becoming the proof that unconditional love still exists. If this message spoke to something deep in your spirit, we invite you to stand with us. Like this video, share it with someone walking through the silence, and subscribe to Chosen One Sanctuary for more revelations like this. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell us how this journey is showing up in your own life, or simply write 777 if you feel the alignment. Your voice matters, your presence heals, and your mission has only just begun.